Hey, and welcome to our study. We're working through some apologetic questions dealing with the Christian faith. And these are not necessarily formal apologetic arguments like the cosmological argument or an epistemological argument, things of that nature. They're more questions that I think would come up in a conversation with a friend. The things that maybe you have thought about that you're still trying to work through the answers to. So maybe we can work through those things together. So last week we covered why even believe in God in the first place. You know, what's our motivation for that? What's our reasoning for that? And hopefully that was a good video. So we're going to continue that. But know that if you ever have ideas for a video or would want me to discuss something in this format, leave a comment. Let me know the type of video you'd like to see, content you'd like to be covered, and I would love to do that. This question that we're going to be looking at today is, why does God make believing in Him so difficult? And hopefully this is a question that you can level with. This is a question that I have asked myself, that loved ones have asked me, that me and my wife have talked about, is why is believing in God so difficult at times? Why can't He make it easier? Why can't, I just be at the beach one day and it's just written out in the sand. Hey, Devin, I'm God and I'm real. No need to doubt it. And then I look up and in the clouds have been formed into that same thing. And I look around and like on a bus, it's just, plastered on the side. Devin, I'm God, I'm real. Ugh, man, that would be it. That's all the evidence I need, right? But instead, it's difficult. I look at the world around me and I rarely see God at work. I see evil. I see disunity. I see hate, aggression, murder, rape, suicide, depression, anxiety. I see children, innocent children dying at the hands of cancer, and things that I cannot come to terms with. Things that make believing in God difficult. So really, not even addressing the question of evil per se. I think maybe we could do that later on. I've done a short video on that already, but just answering that bottom line question, God, why are you making it so difficult? I maybe have this inkling of an idea of a belief that you're real, but so many things don't seem to match up. What do I do with that? And So really, maybe another way to phrase is, why does God put us in a position where we have to try really hard to believe in Him? Why can't He make it easier? Well, it's my personal belief that He could make it easier. So there must be a reason why He doesn't make it easier. I do believe that God is all-powerful. So I know that He could do things to just make Himself known. And if I believe in my Old Testament as well as my New Testament, I know that He has done that in the past. If that, and it's probably not, but if it's true, if those are the only times God has revealed Himself in those ways, it really hasn't been many times throughout history, right? Over the course of 3,500 years that the Bible records, God doesn't make Himself known, in a physical way often. It's actually very rarely. So why does He even choose to do it that way? I know that He can do it, but He's choosing not to do it. So why has He chosen that? Well, we often go through multiple states in life that could probably properly be termed as cognitive dissonance, which means that I have this belief and I know something to be real. It's just not realized around me. It's not there. It's like I expect something to be there, but it's not. It's what psychologists would term cognitive dissonance. And that's normal. It's normal to go through that. It is a perfectly, I keep using the word normal, but that's the one word that's coming to mind. It's normal to feel that way, to have this belief and not see it realized around you. I've been hit by it multiple times where I look around at the world around me and it just doesn't match the reality that I believe in. What Scripture has told me is real doesn't seem to be out there a lot of the times. And it makes believing difficult. And so maybe we come to this idea that, I brought up through, going to the beach and seeing it in the sand and the sky and everywhere else around me. And then I would know that God is real. If God would just send me those clear messages, if He would just make Himself manifest in this real way. And I think that's when I would believe. But before I get into just point by point, God has done that multiple times in history. Come face to face with someone, come face to face with a group of people, and they still just not believe in him. In John chapter 12, verse 29, God speaks from heaven, but then the people just figure, it was thunder. What? How do you get that? You know, if I had heard a voice, a booming voice from heaven speaking, why would I ever then just chalk it up to thunder? But large crowds did that exact same thing. And maybe we'll get to that point again in here in a second. Or how about Matthew chapter 28, verses 11 through 15? After the guard who was guarding Jesus' tomb sees the stone rolled away, sees Mary approach, and this angel speak to Mary. After they witness all of this, they go and tell the Pharisees about what happened, and then they involve themselves in the cover-up of what happened, telling people that the body was just stolen by his disciples. If you had seen an angel, if you had witnessed all this happening, why would you then not believe in that? There's real evidence in the Bible that we can see these magnificent things happen and still not believe. Why not just look at the history of the Israelites? Their whole, from the moment they escape Egypt with the 10 plagues, from the time that they're in the wilderness and are being fed every day from the heavens, after they conquer the land of Canaan, something they thought would never be possible, after God does all of these things for them, what is the reoccurring storyline of the Israelites? They continually turn away from God. So it kind of goes to show us that even if we think that if God would just place himself right in front of us, we believe in him, there's plenty of evidence to show that that just doesn't work. So I know God could make himself known to me, but he chooses not to. And maybe I can see that he chooses not to because it's evidence that it just doesn't work with people. So what has to happen? How do we respond to this? What are we supposed to say in light of this? That God's not just going to continually make himself known to us? What's the reasoning behind it? I think there might be 4 points. And I get these four points from a book by Greg Boyd called Letters to a Skeptic. Pick it up sometime. It's a really good read. So I think there are 4 points. One would be that stupendous events, miraculous events, rarely have a lasting effect on us. The people of that follow Jesus and maybe at times consider themselves disciples, often the times just followed Jesus so that he would feed them. Even though they saw these miraculous things happening all the time, they just wanted to be fed food. They didn't even really care. Even though they were watching miracles happen before them, it didn't have this lasting impression on them. We do the same thing with not even necessarily miraculous events, but maybe large events. Vietnam is all but unknown to most people. The atrocities that occurred there, the reasons why those atrocities occurred, why the war even began. And we could say that about multiple wars throughout our history. Big events, big things that happened over a course of years and decades in some instances. And we forget about them. Martin Luther King Jr. Led a huge revolution in the 60s. And we've largely forgotten it. And we've largely forgotten what it was based on. 9/11, something I was even alive for, still does not have the same impact on it, on the American people that it did in 2001. Not that long ago. Stupendous, huge events rarely have lasting effects on us. So to say that we would be changed if God just appeared right before us, and then we never need to see anything again, just isn't true. It turns out from a human psychological perspective, something would have to be put in front of us again and again and again and again before we would really start to try to conform to it, before we'd really start to believe it, unless there was a want on our part, unless there was a desire for God. Rarely, though, is that desire there for most people. So that was the first point. Second point, We always try to rationalize the miraculous. Like I mentioned in John 12, verse 29, they hear God speak from heaven, but then they just say, it's just thunder. We do the same thing every day with miraculous things around us. We do the same thing when it comes to the life of an unborn baby. We say, it's just a congealed blob and it doesn't have life. It doesn't matter. We say the same thing about our bodies and about the creation around us. That, it's just a random mix of chemicals, everything bouncing around. We are simply stardust. We have no purpose. We won't admit intelligent design there. We won't admit the things that are around us, that the things around us have beauty and have the markings of a maker. We try to rationalize the miraculous. Point 3, and this is one that I think most of us who hold to a materialist worldview, that is a worldview that says the only things that are real are the things that I can touch and see. This point may be a little more difficult for those that think that way. But my third point would be spiritual warfare. It's mentioned in Ephesians chapter 5 and 6. It's mentioned in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 that there is a spiritual battle going on around us all the time. So if we know that there is a spiritual battle in which the forces of good and evil are going around us and inside of us all the time, I think that's pretty good evidence to show that the enemy would be using whatever tactics are at its disposal to keep us from believing in God. So not only do we have ourselves to battle, but we have evil and even demonic forces to fight off as well. And fourthly, these direct exposures to God that we might long for or say that I only need that one true glimpse of God to believe in him. Those things don't actually produce love. We see that in the life of the Israelites. We see that in the multiple people who came in contact with Jesus Christ himself and still did not love him, still did not worship him, still did not follow him. This kind of exposure doesn't lead to love. Maybe it can coerce obedience, but that would probably be the extent of it. If God answered every prayer, every demand I had, and not just me, but the billions of other people in the world, every time they demanded that he made himself known to them, if God answered every prayer, gave every demand for evidence, he would endlessly become a divine vending machine. There would be no love involved. All we'd have to do is ask for it. There would be no us contorting our will to him. Instead, he works for me. Love must be chosen. He gives us strength to believe, but he is absent enough that we have to chase after him, that we have to choose him, that we have to love him. He is absent enough that those who don't want him also won't find him. And that actually is a good thing. It actually gives some credence to why people will say, I don't see God in anything. Well, it's because they haven't looked for him. It's because they don't care. It's because they don't want him, don't chase him, don't want him. So, faith in God then, why it's so difficult, why God doesn't make himself more evident. This type of faith in God isn't so much a question of should you believe, that the evidence is there and you should believe in it, but it's do you want to believe? Are you willing to accept reality for what it is and not what you want it to be? That God has revealed himself in a purposeful way. Not that he can't do other things, but he knows that this way is the right way. That this way is the only option in which you get to choose God. That God isn't your vending machine. That he isn't your servant, but that you are his. You belong to him and you want him. So that is hopefully an answer to the question. If you feel in some way I didn't answer it in the way that you think it should be answered, or maybe you've got a better answer. Maybe you could help me in my faith. I would love to hear all of that in the comments below. And of course, feel free to suggest some options for videos in the future. I pray that you are looking for ways to love and serve your neighbor in sincere and real ways. Peace and love.